My earliest memory of Dad is him carrying me up a lighthouse somewhere, going round and round a spiral staircase, and I don't know how old I was, but he was carrying me up. That's my very earliest memory, probably about 2.
Can't believe this is October, can you?
I can. The leaves are coming down.
Right.
I think he was a very private man, which is a funny phrase now, but he kept himself very much to himself. He talked about sailing, and he took a lot of still photographs of me and the family, but not really about the old days of filmmaking at all. And the beans didn't grow because the deer ate them. You can't have everything.
But he didn't eat the onions, is that correct?
That's correct. All the leeks. He was Hep to everybody, or Heppy. Yeah. He signed all his paintings that he did in his 60s and 70s, Hep, and the date.
This is a very interesting picture of your father with a piece of film in his hands.
Is this one of mine? Yes, it is. Hep writes his life. It's just a write-up for his book, Came the Dawn. That's a nice picture, actually, isn't it?
It is. He's looking at a film strip.
Yeah. I don't think I'd seen that. I'd read that bit.
That's one of the nicest, because it's one of the few pictures we've got with him looking at film.
Yes.
My first camera was one of the Lumia mechanisms. But film stock of the Lumia one-hole perforation was either unobtainable at the time, or I realized that the 4-hole method was the one of the future. Anyhow, I set about converting the camera to take the latter type of film, and I acquired a perforator. The necessary alterations to the mechanism were fairly easy to make, but I soon found that the little take-up box with which it was fitted could not be relied upon to take up the film properly. So I cut a slot in the tripod head and fitted a large black sack beneath, into which the exposed film dropped as it left the camera. That black bag was fitted with sleeves so that I could pass in my hands and an empty box and wind up the film and bring it out ready for the next one to take its place. I took a number of short films that way, and several of them are still in my possession. But after a year or two I found out, as other people did, that 50 seconds was not sufficient playing time for a satisfying film picture. The demand for phantom rides, films taken from the front of a railway locomotive in action, was one of the first causes to point the need for longer material to be available, and I made a camera out of a sprocket wheel projector fitted into a light-tight box with compartments above and below, each for 1,000 feet of film. It was like a rather stumpy coffin stood up on end. It was all right on the engine front, and I took many phantom rides with it in that way in Devonshire and in Wales. But when I took my coffin-like camera to the funeral of Queen Victoria, I nearly died of shame. For when I turned the handle, it made the most ghastly noise, which of course I hadn't noticed on the engine front. Still, I mustn't grumble. The noise was heard by King Edward VII riding between the German Emperor and the Duke of Connaught, and he gave a signal to halt the whole procession right in front of my horrible camera, so that posterity might have the benefit of the historical film.
When you were in France, when you're caravanning, and you visit any of the places you visited with your father when you were...
No, we actually went to Saint Lunaire Beach, where I did go with Dad. but it's all quite changed. Thank you. There. These are all my pots and things which I do in my spare time. Spare being in inverted commas.
When you were born?
1932.
And tell me something about your parents.
My father was Cecil Hepworth. My mother was Olive Elizabeth Walter, known as Betty. She hated the name Olive Elizabeth. They were married in April 1929, and I was unexpected and not planned for, so I believe.
How did they meet?
They met because Dad was conducting the Walton Operatic Society at the Walton Playhouse, and they were doing a series of Gilbert and Sullivan. And Mum was in the Mikado, playing one of the three little girls from school.
Yum yum.
Right. And he took her out to dinner to try and persuade her, and as I'm not musical, it's difficult, to sing either contralto or soprano, which she wasn't, to change her mind. That's my mother and father, the British film producer, and Miss Olive Walter of Walton-on-Thames, whose marriage took place at Chertsey Registry Office, and it's now been revealed. Mr. Hepworth is nearly 60 and his bride is in the late 20s. They went for a honeymoon in Switzerland, and my mother was seasick in Dover Harbour. He had 3 grown-up children, and the eldest was the same age as my mother. They had been very worried that he was going to marry Alma Taylor, whom they didn't like, but he married my mother instead, and they didn't like her either. 4 of us had nicknames. Boo was Elizabeth, my eldest half-sister, the one that appears as the baby in Rescued by Rover. Puggy was the next one down. That's Margaret, her sister. She absolutely hated her nickname. Tom didn't have a nickname. I was called Tuppence. Pocket money. When I was with Dad in Platts Lane, the family who owned the house were a couple called Solomon, and he was a jeweller, and he made me a brooch with 2 pennies because I was called Tuppence, and then later a 6pence set in silver. We used to see quite a lot of the 2 girls, of Elizabeth and Margaret. We didn't see very much of Tom. I mean, he was grown up by then, and in the war he was in the Merchant Navy, minesweeping, and he wanted his mother's money that had been left to him, and Dad didn't want him to have it, and they had an almighty row, and Tom took it anyway, or got it somehow, I don't know how, and he bought a Brixham trawler and sailed off to the South Seas. That's good enough.
And that was Pigeon Island?
That was Pigeon Island.
And was he there for the rest of his life?
Well, mostly, yes. I mean, they sailed all around the Caribbean, the Galapagos, all around the Pacific.
But was he interested in films at all, like his father, or not?
Not film, still photography. He was a film photographer with somebody called Tom Follett. I've joined a group called West Street Potters. They're in Farnham. They're an offshoot of the University College of Farnham. And we're a big group now, there's over 100 members. And we have classes every day of the week and three evenings as well, with professional tutors. And I joined them in 1985-ish, I would think.
So before that you didn't do any pottery then?
No. And I just joined and loved it.
Right.
Stuart brought me a wheel and the kiln, which is there. And I can do it at home as well as at pottery class, which I still go to.
Who do you recognise in that?
Well, that's my dad, Cecil M. Hepworth explaining the use of the shutter and masking devices which he designed and made in 1899 and which were afterwards embodied in the standard bioscope.
With the grey hair is called George Henderson, and the man in the middle is Colonel A.C. Brumhead.
He was the one who fed me, who changed my nappies and all that sort of thing, not Mum. She, at that stage, was not a mother. Later she became very much a mother, but when I was very small, no. That one wouldn't be allowed these days, would it? Advert for Mr. Therm, the gas company. That is for Boots soap, sitting in the bath. Age 3 it says on the back. That one's for Eucryl toothpaste, cleaning our dog Judy, who's an Airedale, cleaning her teeth with a toothbrush and a tin of toothpaste. Toothpaste in those days came in a tin. Well, they're all of me that I know about.
Why was this?
To earn some money.
When was this?
When I was about 2 or 3.
So early 1930s?
30s, mid-30s.
Right.
Yeah. And they're very good photographs. By the time I was 3, I could read, which, when you think children today quite often leave school at 14 or 15 unable to read, was quite something. He taught me from a book called Reading Without Tears, which I remember very well.
One of the series of films that is very popular in the last few years were the Tilly series.
Yes.
Of Alma Taylor and Chrissy White.
Yes.
What do you think of those?
Well, they were fun, but, you know, of their time. I don't know that they'd still go down now, would they?
They
With
do.
today audiences.
They do. They're considered to be suffragette films in
Oh,
question
they're
marks.
not. Are they really?
Women ruling the roost, young women, yes, showing that they can take on the world, yes.
Yes, well, I suppose those two, when they were in the mood, could have done.
Yes.
Yes. We didn't go to the cinema very often. I mean, he didn't think a great deal of what he called modern films.
So you wouldn't have gone to see what was currently available?
Not very often. I remember being taken to the Disney films, the Snow Whites and things like that. And later, in the 40s, I was taken to see A Matter of Life and Death, Michael Powell, and Emmerich Pressburger, which Dad thought was marvellous. I know, and I've seen it twice or 3 times since, and I love it too.
Yes.
Yes.
But if he didn't bring you to the cinema, did he bring you to the circus or to the theatre or to the opera?
Not opera.
Well, because that's how he met your mother.
I know, but I was certainly not taken to opera. Might have been taken to the odd concert, but I think it's fairly unlikely.
Right.
I am not and never have been musical at all.
Would your mother have still gone, though?
She might have gone.
Right.
She would probably have gone. She used to go out with him to dinners and things, and I would see her dressed up and be left with the nanny or the babysitter or whatever.
This is a rather strange picture.
I know. 1921. Very strange, isn't it? Eating an apple.
It is.
You notice he's wearing a hat in nearly all the pictures. He wears a hat. He used to wear a Panama or a Homburg in the winter.
That's a nice photograph, isn't it?
When he was in army uniform. Yeah. I once asked him why he didn't keep his rank of captain, and he said, "One doesn't." That's a dry glaze,
Right.
which is exactly what it says. It's not shiny. It's a dry pot.
And did you manufacture or have the idea for these almost celluloid strips going
Yes,
down?
yes.
This is like the soundtrack on the side.
It is a bit, isn't it? It's a little wheel I've got which you can make lines on,
Right.
on the clay.
Right. Often in early film, when you had an intertitle, there would often be a way of stealing the film. So if it went to France, you could actually get rid of the intertitle and put another language in, and you
Yes.
wouldn't know who made it. But
Oh, I see.
He had a system of dots and dashes.
That is the typical sort of
He's the
thing.
only one who did it. Nobody else has done it. Well, the title would be one dot. The first intertitle would be two dots, and then you get to five, and it'll be a dash. And this is the type of intertitle I told you about, with the numbering system at the top, dots and dashes, which
Where are your dots and dashes? I can't see
Well,
them.
there's two dots here and one dash
Oh, I see.
above.
And they're nothing to do with Morse code stuff.
Well, I think it is. I think it's a Morse code type numbering system, but nobody else seems to have done it. And he was very good at inventing things that nobody else did, and probably copywriting it so nobody could copy it,
Yes.
like the vibraphone.
But you think it could be Morse code because
No, we went.
He did a bit of teaching of me of the Morse code, a little bit.
Where was this?
And my husband did the rest.
The other thing he had on the set sometimes is the word Hepwicks.
Yes.
You see on the set Hepwicks, which means that you couldn't steal. This is my film.
That's right.
Somewhere hidden away sometimes.
Yes.
I've seen it once on a gravestone. There's a.
Well, it's not Dad's gravestone. He hasn't got one.
There's another very interesting one in a police station about a policeman called Our New Policeman. Very good film. And in it, on the police station, it says, "Reward for anyone who steals Hepwick's films." Again, telling
that it was Hepwick's, yes.
Don't take my film. So he obviously was very astute and aware.
But not a businessman.
Mm. Do you think he ran out of ideas in the end?
No, but I think he went on wanting to use old stories which were not fashionable, probably Victorian stories, and they were old-fashioned even when he was making them, to a certain extent. A friend of mine reckons that at one point my father was probably worth about £1 million, and to think that, you know, everything was sold for 4,000.
Now, the Walton studio that your father had for probably 20 years,
Yeah.
something like that, maybe a bit longer. Did you ever visit that with him?
No.
Did he ever talk
Not
about
that I
it?
remember, and he never talked about it to me.
Was that because you think it was a bad memory for him?
I think he was a very private man, which is a funny phrase now, but he kept himself very much to himself and didn't talk about that sort of thing.
When it had been pulled down?
When it was actually being pulled down.
I think it was taken by one of the Faithful brothers.
Oh, was it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it was. Let's find out how you do this glazing on the pottery.
Well, glazes are made by weighing out a series of powders, just powders, and they're weighed in a certain ratio depending upon the sort of glaze you want. For example, for a green glaze you'd have copper and that sort of thing. Then these are mixed up with about 50-50 water,
Right.
and then sieved through a native mesh sieve so that it's smooth and it comes through smooth. Then you use the glaze there.
Right.
Onto a biscuit ware.
That's poured onto
That's
biscuit.
after the first firing. It's called biscuit or bisque,
Right.
and that is absorbent. So it absorbs the water, leaves the glaze on the surface. My mother left him for another younger man. I don't know him, I never knew anything about him. I stayed with Dad, and we went to live in Platts Lane in Hampstead. We had the top floor of a very tall old house, and I went to school not very far away. My pocket money was twopence a week, always new pennies, and they were kept on the mantelpiece. One of the girls at school bought me some chocolate and then wanted her penny back. So I took a penny before I was due it. And of course Dad found out, and my bicycle was taken away as a punishment. Now that is a sort of upbringing that I think we all had. All four of us. Very strict, very firm, but very fair. And later, in 1939, when I was on holiday with Dad in Cornwall, funnily enough, very near St Ives, I went down with appendicitis, was taken to a hospital in Hale, which was run by nuns, and they tried to give me an anaesthetic, and I fought them like mad, because you know it was chloroform and ether. And the only way I would accept the anaesthetic was to be told I'd get my bicycle back, if I did. That's just one example of one of the things Dad did for me. When I was ill in Cornwall, Mum came down to see me, obviously, and I think they got together again then, because we then certainly started to move into houses in Pinner, and they were together. So obviously he took her back, which not very many men today would do.
Did you often see your half sisters at this period?
Not very much then. Later on, Dad was very fond of them. I don't think Mum was particularly. They were too close in age and too much, how can I put it, in competition with each other to really get on. And we certainly didn't see much of Tom. I've only met Tom about 3 times in my life, unfortunately, because I liked him the last time I met him very much.
I'm interested a little bit about your father's 3 sisters.
Yeah.
What were their names?
The youngest was Kitty, she was actually christened Kitty. The middle one was Ethel, known as Effie, and the eldest one was Dorothy, known as Dorothy. No pit name for her. He was very, very fond of his sisters, his 3 sisters. One of them had married a vicar, so they were living all 3 in a vicarage at Alconbury. We used to go and stay there a lot. I was evacuated there. But before I was evacuated, I was there with Dad, and we went into Huntingdon. This is just a little story, really. And we went into the local shops, and he spent £5 on tinned food. And we filled the car, and I mean filled it. Took it back to the vicarage to try and get everybody through the war without running out of food, which of course it didn't, but it helped. I mean, that sort of thing, he was very, very generous to everybody.
And this, I gather, is you?
This is me with a tent and my teddy bear and a cat, yes, in the garden at Alconbury.
Taken by your father or your mother?
My father. Enormous vicarage with stone floors everywhere and the dining room miles from the kitchen. I was just sent there. My aunts educated me. He was busy trying to invent something which might have turned into television. And I remember seeing him trying to work it out in pen and paper and drawings.
How much did he earn his money then?
When I first was born, probably, he was still freelancing. But then he went to work for the National Screen Service, making trailers, and in the war making food flashes for the Ministry of Food.
Yes, madam.
And where were these made?
Mostly at Greenford in Middlesex,
Right.
and the offices were in Soho in Wardour Street.
Hello, Joe. Enjoying your grub? Don't throw the bread away. Look, take out your money. Now throw that away. Bread and money are both worth dough. That's the point. All right, we'll give it back to you.
I remember going to the cutting rooms at Greenford and talking to the people there and playing with bits of film on the floor and things like that, but that is about it. I also remember going to Wardour Street on a Saturday morning with Dad and being told to sit in a corner and be quiet, and then I was taken to Lion's Corner House for ice cream and chocolate sauce afterwards for being good. If I wasn't good, I didn't get it.
Did he use you in any of the films at all?
No, I don't think so.
But in one of them your Russian book appears, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, which I didn't know until I saw that thing at the National Film Theatre.
And you don't know how that happened?
No.
Was that your mother's doing, do you say?
I would think it could well have been, yes.
I say, just a moment. Yes, both of you. You'll be getting a new ration book pretty soon now, and it'll save you a lot of time and trouble if the name and address and details are the same on your present ration book as they are on your identity card. I just thought I'd remind you, that's all.
Did your mother work?
No.
So
No. Well, she taught dancing to small children. She actually taught Joyce Grenfell to dance as a very small child, and she indeed taught me. Not that I'm any good now. Well, this, as far as I can make out, is a typewritten, and it would have been done by Dad, typed by him, I mean, on his Remington Portable. It's the notes for his lecture, which he used to go around the country doing after the war.
In that much over-quoted film, Rescued by Rover, the heroine's part was played by my daughter, aged 8 months, the name part by my dog, the harassed mother and father by my wife and myself, respectively, the nursemaid by a girl out of the cutting room, and only the juvenile lead and the villainess were professionals. For their day's work, they each had 10 shillings, which included their railway fares from London to Walton-on-Thames. I'm not quoting this in any spirit of boastful pride. It's just how things were in those days.
May Clark played the nursemaid. Dad's first wife, Margaret McGuffey. She died in October 9th, 1917, and of breast cancer, I believe.
Because she does appear in several of the films.
Oh yes, she appears very much in Rescued by Rover and quite a lot of other ones.
And according to your father's autobiography, she wrote Rescued by Rover.
She did.
Of your father's films, which might be your favourite?
It probably has to be Rescued by Rover. Because there were so many copies or prints made, it has to be the one that runs the smoothest all the way through and tells the story. My aunt, Effie, she always played the piano for him without any real idea of what the film was about. She just made it up as she went along. He came to my school and gave his lecture, which was a great fillip for me.
And did you know all that? Was that new to you, what you heard?
Most of that was new then, but I did know that he was giving lectures and talked him into doing it, or got one of the teachers to talk him into doing it. Picture I took of Dad in Belgium in 1946. which is, I think, a very nice picture. I'm very fond of that one. We went on holiday to the Broads, and Dad filmed. He was trying to sell, I think, as far as I can work it out, he was trying to sell films of holiday places. I imagine they would have been colour. I don't know, because I've never seen them. But he certainly did one of that Broads trip, and he taught me to sail a dinghy there. We then went to Bembridge, and we sailed together there too, on the Isle of Wight, in a hired dinghy. But those films have disappeared. He did one also on the Isles of Scilly. He went there one January to see the daffodil crop being harvested, which was being sent back to this country for sale. And then we went back in the summer and stayed for a fortnight, I think. And he went on filming. And I don't know if you know the Isles of Scilly, but there's boat trips go out from St Mary's, the main island. Every day you can choose which island you're going to on various boats. And they drop you off on the island. You have the day there. They say what time they're coming back. And one day, Dad went to St Martin's on his own. Mum and I stayed in St Mary's, I think. And the boatman couldn't find him when he went back, so he thought he caught another boat back, because it was very easy. Lots of boatmen went to every island. And so he came back, and Mum said, "But where's Hep? What's happened to him?" And so one of the boatmen went all the way back to St Martin's to find him fast asleep on the sand, on the beach, sort of rather behind a rock, a bit difficult to see. That would be fairly typical of Dad in his 70s by then. We also went to Belgium. In 1949 in Brittany, he and Mum had to leave me there, and I would have been, 17, because they had to come home to go to the Royal Garden Party at Buckingham Palace. One of the many. They went to, but that was the second one. And he was by then getting a little bit frail. And Mum used to tell the story that when it was time to go home, she said, "Well, you wait here, Hep, I'll go and get the car." And she went off and found where the chauffeur car was, and went back to find Dad, to find him lying asleep on the grass beside the path, with people saying, "I don't know what that man's doing," with his hat over his face, having a sleep. And she had to wake him up and get him back to the car.
That locket that you're wearing on your neck and the chain underneath it, can you tell us something about that, please?
Yes, the little brooch was the opal tie-pin given to Dad by Queen Alexandra after he'd shown films to her and King Edward VII at Windsor Castle. And the chain was my father's gold watch chain, which I keep for very sentimental reasons. At the moment I'm just trying to centre a piece of clay. In other words, get it completely and steadily in the middle. And then I'm bringing it up. It's conditioning the clay, if you like.
Any particular clay you use?
This is stoneware. I also use porcelain sometimes. Now I'm making a hole in the middle of it, hopefully not right down to the bottom.
When you left school, what did you do?
I went to where Dad had been, the Regent Street Polytechnic Art School, where I studied for 3 years and met my husband.
Your grandfather, T.C. Hepworth, gave lectures at
He did.
that venue.
Yes.
It's strange, isn't it?
I know, it just happens to be one of those things that I think Dad may have pulled strings at the Poly to get me in there. because I wasn't very good.
What was his politics?
Conservative.
Was that with a big C or a small C?
Big.
Right.
I mean, it was very pro-Churchill. I remember that. I must have inherited that. So that is an indication of his politics, yes. I'm starting to lift it up. I think Dad was probably quite religious until his first wife died. And I think he probably prayed like mad that she wouldn't. And after that he gave up. Because he was very fond of her, I believe. And he used to play his organ a lot.
Yes.
When I was a child, I remember.
And where was the organ?
At Ruislip, in our house at Ruislip, in the dining room.
Right.
Quite a small one, but it had 3 keyboards and the Celestine on top. And I had to pump it.
Right. And did you learn to play yourself?
No. Well, I was supposed to, but I didn't.
Right.
He was a very keen watercolour painter, but self-taught completely. And I have quite a few, about 8 now, of his paintings. The rest are scattered around all over the shop.
Are any of them to do with film, or are they all to
No.
do with
The countryside, or foreign holidays, or whatever.
Well, the countryside is very important in his films, actually.
In his films, the countryside and old buildings, yes, always. He was very, very keen on England and the English countryside. This is the yarn market in Dunster, a very famous view. He painted it one afternoon. It's Dunster in Somerset. He was very bad at painting figures, but he did manage to get some in. Now if you take a picture there, it's full of cars. Ruislip Church, where I was married in 1953. And that is the picture of Dinan, which is up on the wall there.
Right. So did he do it from the photograph?
No. He did not approve of painting from photographs. The only time, to my knowledge, that he did it was to do a picture of his boat, the Bluebird, which is hanging on the wall outside.
How long would it take him to do a painting like that?
A day?
Did that and wants to stay in one place and do that?
Yes, he stayed there. He always painted from life, sitting on a stool with his watercolours and jam jars of water. This is my half-sister Elizabeth, Dad's eldest daughter. Obviously a cutting from the Chichester Observer in 1986. She was an art teacher and painted prolifically, mostly in oils. But this is a talk she did.
Did you go to that?
I went to several of her lectures, yes.
Right.
She gave several for charity, and I went to those.
And did she show films with herself in it?
No, only Rescued by Rover. He started quite a lot to do with the British Board of Film Censors and was one of the censors for a long time. It was more or less his idea, governing body, to stop what today would be pornographic films.
The chap who ran it was called Wilkinson.
That's right, Brooke Wilkinson.
Brooke Wilkinson.
He was one of my godfathers.
Right.
Right.
He's important because he, I think, founded the KMA in 1908, the Kinematograph Manufacturers Association. And I think your father was a signatory to that. They were trying to stop Pathé taking over the country because the French company Pathé had come over and were dominating the market,
Yes,
cutting
yes.
the price of film.
Yes.
And he got together with this group of people. Two of your father's best-known cameramen who had a long career after he finished at Nettlefold were the two Faithful brothers, Geoffrey and Stanley.
Yes.
Can you tell me anything about them at all?
Geoffrey I didn't know so well. Stan I knew quite well, and his wife Kit. They were very, very sweet couple.
Wasn't he a partner in the Walton Photographic Company in the early 30s. I have a letterhead.
Could well have
has the
been.
two of them.
Yes, I should think that's probably correct. That I wouldn't know, Tony. To my darling Valerie, with fondest love from her pa, Cecil M. Hepworth. That's how he always signed.
Were you around when your father was writing his memoirs?
Oh, yes.
So was he talking to you about...
No. Very private. He used to type away upstairs and we didn't know anything about it. He never discussed it at all until afterwards. Well, certainly not in my hearing, maybe in my mother's.
What was your mother's attitude to the sort of...
Oh, anything to get him doing something, keep him happy.
Right.
So that he was able to keep out of her way, I expect. I know that he did talk a bit about how difficult it was to remember dates, which it is for me. I'm nearly the age he was when he was writing it, and probably about the same age now.
So, did he talk to any of the old people who used to employ, like the faithfuls?
He would have talked to the faithfuls, Stan and Jeff, both of them. He also went to see Bromhead quite a lot.
A.C. Bromhead of
Yes,
Gaumont?
yeah, of Gaumont. But that is about all I remember. I don't think there's any more on his memoirs, except him doing the drawings, which were scraper board and pen and ink. Mostly scraper board.
Right.
And he taught me how to do it.
I like the one at the beginning of the book. You know, there's one on the front of the train where he got a camera, almost like a coffin-shaped camera.
Well, they
where
were.
You took your Phantom Ride.
That's right, the Phantom Ride one. Yes, I remember that. Always fiddling with something as an invention. He electrified our grandfather clock, which he put a mains unit into so that it struck and ran on mains.
That's interesting because he started off making things in the 1890s as
Right,
well.
so he never stopped. We had a workshop. He always had a lathe and all his tools, which he left to Jeff Faithful when he died. But his old lathe that he'd made all the developing things and things like that, he was still in when he died. When he was ill, the Cinematograph Trade Benevolent Fund sent him to a nursing home when he was ill, and I have a letter from there to my mother saying how well he'd been treated and how marvellous it was. And then after he died, when Mum had very little money, the Benevolent Fund gave her a pension, which came, I think, monthly, I can't remember. But we had to fill in forms every year for it, to say how little money she'd got, but she didn't have any money.
Now this is an obituary which I've never seen before, which has got some clips from some of his films in it.
Yes, it has. Date, February 11th, 1953, just after he died.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting, one of the pictures he's got here is of Ronald Colman.
Oh, yes.
Without a moustache, if you can recognise him there.
Good heavens.
He was in, I think, several Hepworth films at Walton and
Yes, he
The
was.
Adventuress.
Yes.
Um,
Dad left in his will his money divided up into 16ths, which was awfully awkward. But he left Tom a pair of binoculars. Stop. But other people got 3/16 or 5/16 or whatever. And that included his sisters, who were all alive when he died, his 2 elder daughters and myself and Mum. He left his body for medical research, and his body was duly collected, and that was that, we thought. But his eldest sister was very high church and insisted that we had a memorial service in London. I don't know which church. I haven't got a clue. I can picture it, but I don't know what it was. It was ghastly from our point of view, Mum and mine, but there were a load of film people there, so I suppose it was the right thing to do. 2 years after he died, my mother got a letter from the medical people saying, "What do you want done with his remains? We finished with them. If you don't say, we'll bury them in a pauper's grave."
What did she say?
We actually got Elizabeth, who was his executor, to trace back. She had to find the doctor who signed the death certificate, and he died. And she had to talk people into signing a cremation certificate, and his body was cremated and is in a churchyard in London.
Which one?
I've got it somewhere, South London Crematorium.
Right.
After he died, my half-sister arranged this exhibition of his watercolours at Foyle's Gallery in Charing Cross Road. The paintings are priced in guineas, and they start at about 8 guineas and go on to 15 for one or two. Mum or Dad had bought a house in Ruislip then. He bought it for £2,000. We sold it for £3,000 when he died. Mum then bought a shop, or we bought a shop in Hampton Wick, a sweet shop, and I ran it with her for about 3 or 4 years. And after that I got jobs and things, and we built a house at Lightwater, Stuart and I.
And this is wonderful. This is a cartoon by
Yep.
Lowe.
I know. Now, I hate to tell you this, but when we were clearing out after Dad died, he had a complete set of cartoons by Lowe, all of him and the filmmaking. Some of the glass was broken, some of them were a bit tatty, and Mummy and I threw the lot away, which is awful when you think about it now. Absolutely criminal. We should never have done it, but we didn't know any better.
I also wonder though whether the what happened to his business in the mid-20s, whether that would have had an effect on him in later life.
I think it must have done. I mean, it contributed to the fact that he didn't have any money, and that Elizabeth couldn't go to university, which had been planned. And we certainly had very little when I was growing up.
What about this Hepworth plaque here? Do you know anything about that? It's a little cutting about a
This
plaque.
is the plaque that was put up in Walton. It was put up on the studios, and they called the car park and the road Hepworth Way. I think Daddy would have had a fit.
Excellent.
And that's using a cut-off wire.
That's just a cut-off wire. Otherwise it would stick.
What do you call that shape?
Well, it's going to be a bowl when I've cut the lid off the bottom of it.
Do you think he was a happy man?
I think with his first marriage he was certainly very happy. With his second marriage, also happy, yes, basically, once they'd got back together again. He was very, very fond of my mother. And when he died, the last thing he said was, "Take care of your mum." Which I did.
do you think his legacy is?
I hope it's the character of a very gentle man and a very concerned man for all the people who worked for him, for his family with the exception of his son. He was always concerned about national things. I remember listening to Chamberlain's speech in 1939 with him when we started with the war. Although everybody had seen it coming, including him, he was terribly upset and went out in the garden on his own. And I think those sort of things affected him a lot.
Your memory of him, would you say he's a Victorian or an Edwardian, or how would you describe him?
Oh gosh,
In your
a
memory?
gentleman. Not any particular era. A gentleman. A gentle man in that way.